Hey everybody, I am back with primary and secondary sources part 2. And this video won't be nearly as long. We're just going to review what we went over yesterday, and then you guys are going to have a Google quiz to take for me today. If you have any questions about how the format's changed a little bit with watching videos and maybe not having as many assignments to do, but actually getting to listen to a lesson, then just reach out to me. Also, your language looks a little bit different this week. We've got to keep writing. So I'm going to be sending you some writing prompts, even if they're not TDA based, so that we can continue evaluating your writing. But make sure you follow the rules on our writing, our language, of how many sentences it needs to be, but also revising and editing, because we'll be putting in some writing grades for that as well. Any IXLs you have not completed, remember, in order to get to 100, they need to be 80% or higher. So we're going to be getting in touch with you this week and letting you know what we are missing from you guys from the last couple weeks before spring break. All right, hopefully you listened yesterday and we talked about primary and secondary sources. Remember, we talked about, like, maybe you'd heard those words in art class with Miss Beggs as she talked about the color wheel. Primary colors are the colors that we can kind of add together to make up all of your secondary and your tertiary colors. Well, when we talk about them in terms of sources, that basically means, were you there at the time of the event when whatever it was made, delivered, written, captured maybe by photograph? Were you there at the time of the actual event? And I gave you the example yesterday of somebody witnessing a fight on the playground. The person that saw it is the primary source. The people that they tell that then come and tell, basically it passes through the grapevine, kind of like what we talked about with folk tales being passed down. Those are secondary sources because they never saw it with their own eyes. They weren't there at the time of the actual event. So remember, photographs are primary sources, tombstones, birth certificates, and of course articles that are written at the time of the event, newspaper articles, journals, because you would be writing that yourself, autobiographies. But secondary sources are going to be things we write about other people. If we didn't live their life, that would be biographies. It would be history textbooks, newspaper articles written hundreds of years after event. We're going to look at some more primary sources from the Revolutionary War time period. We looked at colonial America yesterday, but now we're going to look at some that came out right around the time of the war. All right, it was a propaganda poster, and it was trying to get people to join the army. And it says join or die. And if you'll look, there's segmented parts on this snake. And those are representing the colonies. You'll see SC for South Carolina. So because this actually came out at the time of the event, it's a primary source. Remember, we talked about maps being primary sources. Okay? Don't even know if I held that one right, I think. Well, we have some writing, almost like calligraphy down at the bottom, original writing. So even though these are replicas produced at the time of the event, makes them a primary source. We have pictures that taken at the time of the event, okay, or drawn at the time of the event. These actually came out in the Boston newspaper. This was a surrender of Cornwallis at Yorktown, 1781, a written document. So that also would have been a primary source. And then we begin to see pictures that came out like in newspapers. Obviously, no cameras, so they drew them. This is the Boston Massacre. We're going to be reading about it in a couple of days. Things that were built during that time. We have Independence Hall. Remember, we talked about how it didn't just have to be documents. It could be actual artifacts or buildings that were built. We have a painting, a signing of the Declaration of Independence here. This is a Paul Jones, an artist rendering here. We have the Liberty Bell that came about during this time in 1751. You'll see the crack in it. It's actually on one of the books that we're going to be reading, and we'll talk about why it's got a crack in it and why they don't ring it anymore. But that's definitely a primary source artifact. Ooh, we have all heard of this. This is a replica of the Declaration of Independence. So written in 1776 when they declared their freedom. So remember, those documents written at that time are obviously primary sources. Here's another one, no stamped paper to be had. This is right before the Stamp Act that we're going to start reading about in the next couple of days in our books. And then we just have some more pictures that were drawn back then. Our fearless leader, hopefully you know this guy that we're going to be talking a whole lot about, George Washington. We have some more little things that were hung up in the towns and in the colonies. I believe this is Patrick Henry's famous Give Me Liberty or Give Me Death speech. And we're learning about it in our book, our informational book first, okay? So primary sources, let's review again before you take your quiz. You had to be there. So if you didn't live during that time period, then it is not a primary source. Primary source had to be written, built, put together, had to be delivered at the actual time of the event. Secondary sources, remember, are different. They're from hearsay, like you heard something happen, somebody told you something happened, you researched about something on your own, you looked in a textbook or you looked in an encyclopedia, or maybe you wrote about somebody else's life. Those are all secondary sources. So what you're going to do, as soon as you click off this video, there's a little Google quiz. Make sure you take it today. You're just going to look at some things and you're going to pick whether it's primary or whether it's secondary. And the question you ask yourself is, did the person have to be there at the actual time of the event? And remember, we talked about things like speeches and tombstones and birth certificates. While they're a little unordinary, they still were primary source documents. People had to be there, okay? All right, hopefully this helped you guys out. Tomorrow, we're going to be reading in this book, if your parents happen to order it. If they didn't, it's okay. It's not an actual Magic Tree House in terms of a novel. This is a research guide, so it's going to be nonfiction informational text. And we're going to be reading about life in the colonies. We're going to be reading about how the war went and how the war ended. Usually I bounce back and forth between two books, but with us doing it this way, I'm going to read this entire book to you and us discuss a lot of the things with it, show you the pictures with it, maybe show you some other things that I brought home with the Revolutionary War, and us focus on informational text. And then we'll read the historical I Survived text. So if you didn't get that one yet and you want to order it, you still have time to order it as well. All right. See you guys later. Take your quiz. Bye.